Okay, welcome everybody. This is my live stream of my complete box Sega Genesis games. Yes, I totally realize there is a Sega Master System game to start. In fact, I'll just move that aside for right now. Traditionally done through this whole thing. I got to give a big shout out to Chris at Classic Gaming Quarterly again for really kind of inspiring me and really getting me into Sega Genesis games. Really because I didn't really have a lot of knowledge of it, and he was the one that kind of I guess I kind of explored the way through his own memories and whatnot, and so I began to seek those opportunities myself. So if it wasn't for this guy, I probably wouldn't be doing anything like this. So here we are for my complete box Sega Genesis, or mostly complete box Sega Genesis games. And so we'll start off with something that I showed initially, and that's a non-Sega Genesis game. And this is the only Sega Master System game I have. I never had a Sega Master System. I think I may have known one person that had a Sega Master System game, or a Sega Master System. I know that I have a colleague at work that had one. He was pretty proud of it. But this was definitely one I picked up because of Chris in the stream. And this is Master of Darkness. This is actually purchased this, I think, from a guy in England. And the Sega Master System was much more successful in England and South America than it was in the United States, where it had a pretty minor share. I don't know too many people that had it, like I said before. But this game is pretty much like a Castlevania clone, except for it's a guy with a sword. And but you can definitely tell they were. It was just about a flat-out rip-off without actually completely ripping it off. I mean, the subject matter, the stages, the whole look of it was extremely Castlevania-esque, and I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool. But the thing that impressed me the most with Sega Master System is just how vivid the colors were out of that system. I don't know, I guess my thoughts, I always thought Sega Master System would be like something beneath Nintendo Entertainment System, but that really wasn't the case. I think their games probably deserved a lot more credit and a much better following in the United States if they only had been marketed a little bit better. But that game I thought was pretty cool, and as a simple action platformer, it was a game I wanted to pick up. And when I got my my Mega SG from Analog, it came with an adapter so I can play Sega Master System games. And this, like I said, that's the only Sega Master System game that I own. So we'll take that one off. Okay, I know I've told you that this was supposed to be complete in box games. I do have a couple loose games because yesterday, as I was doing my stream of loose games, I realized that I had left out 4 of them. And one of them is actually a pretty, I think, decent game. The others are reasonable games, but maybe they're not quite as notable. And the first one is Biohazard Battle. This is a kind of a side-scrolling shooter. It's kind of interesting. I actually first learned this, believe it or not, through Metal Jesus' channel. And more or less, it's the shooter, whatever you're, I guess, flying, you're some kind of organic organism in a way. And you have one of 4 different choices that you can be. And they both have their own special abilities, but just like any shooter, you're powering them up. And once you get enough power-ups in it, it can be pretty dominant in the game. But it is also fun to play co-op, which I think is kind of cool, which you don't always see in a shooter. And this one's, I don't know, I thought it looked intriguing. Some of the initial stage sound is kind of annoying. The music's not great. But actually some of the stages I think are pretty cool, and has almost kind of like almost a life force type kind of feel to it. And I don't know. I've enjoyed it. It's not one you hear people talk about too much. This one, I'll admit, I've never played it. I probably should have purchased this for my history through video games class that I was hoping to teach someday. And this is Warrior of Rome. It's kind of a strategy game based on, of course, on the Roman Empire. And I definitely probably would use it for that now. I don't know. I saw this game over at Gaming Generations and Lacrosse, and I think I only spent like $7 or $8 on it. And I don't know. It's interesting to me, like how some of these third-party publishers are. This one's BigNet US, and it seems, I mean, it almost feels like it's a homebrew game with how it looks, but it was actually a Micronet game as well. And I don't know, it's just kind of funny to me how some games can look, like have just like almost like a heavy metal album cover, like something you'd see out of like an Iron Maiden album, or maybe like Molly Hatchet or something. But then there's others that, it looks like cheap crap. And this one's a cheap crap one, in my opinion. But a strategy game. I think they made a sequel also, Warrior of Rome 2. And so obviously it must have been reasonable enough that they felt they could follow it up with a sequel. Okay, next is Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Crossroads of Time. I don't know if there's any Star Trek fans out there. And this one, I enjoy Star Trek Deep Space Nine. In fact, I would maybe argue it's my favorite series, which I know amongst that community that would put me in as an outcast, probably. A little bit darker series compared to the rest of them, but I enjoyed it. Maybe that's why. This is a Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Crossroads of Time. I've only played like the first level in this game, and I really couldn't figure out. You're having to defuse an explosive, and despite multiple tries, I wasn't able to get it done. But most of the time, these Star Trek games are pretty fun. Sort of, I guess you'd say, they're kind of like a junior RPG kind of game where you have different tasks that you have to fill, different missions, and of course, the different crew members you have different traits and abilities that might be useful for different missions. And while I've never really seen like the full storyline for this one, I think there's a lot of interesting things that could happen. I'd be really curious to see if the Dominion gets in this one or if it just sticks with Cardassian stuff. So I'll admit a little bit of ignorance there. But typically Star Trek games have been pretty fun in my experience, at least whether consoles or computer games. And I'm sure this probably has some qualities to it, but I'm not expecting the world either. So the last loose game I'm going to show, and I promise after that it's all complete in box stuff, or mostly complete in box stuff. There'll be at least boxes. Maybe they're not entirely complete, but they'll be there. Is Gunstar Heroes. This is the one that I really was kicking myself about. I purchased this game right around Christmas time this year, and I purchased it from GameStop. Yeah, I know I should go to hell for that. But Gunstar Heroes is pretty much a run and gun kind of a sides platforming shooter, kind of similar to almost like Metal Slug, but for Genesis. And it was made by Treasure. And the more I've heard about the company that the developer Treasure, the more it seems really interesting, or like even more interesting to me. Apparently, it was a pretty small company of guys that broke away from, I want to say Konami, or was it Neo Geo? I can't remember. It was one of the major Japanese video game developers, and they broke away because they wanted to do something unique for themselves, and so they created this company, and they just do brilliant work, absolutely brilliant work. And I've seen a playthrough of this. I've only played this once, but it's pretty freaking cool, and it's also pretty damn intense. based on my experience just playing with my standard controller, I think I might want to go to my arcade stick instead. I do have a Sega Genesis arcade stick, and I think that might be a better choice for that game. But pretty intense boss battles, and most of the time I've seen playthroughs of it's been co-op. So that would definitely be something I'd like to try too someday. But Gunstar Heroes is a pretty good one, and I think I spent about $65 for it. But I was glad I did. Okay, so now for our box stuff. And I guess we'll start with our sports games. And to be perfectly honest, that's pretty cool because I'm going to start with the first real Sega Genesis game that I played a lot. Now, I talked about Bill Walsh's college football and things like that. But the first time I ever really spent a lot of time playing Sega Genesis was when I was a sophomore in high school. And I was playing in a basketball tournament in Rochester. And we were staying in a hotel over Christmas at this Christmas tournament. And one of the guys that was in the room had a Genesis. And the game he brought with him was Skitchin. And Skitchin is about as mid-90s as it gets in terms of, or early mid-90s as it gets in terms of music. It's all about the extremes, like when everything was extreme sports, man. When people were drinking Surge all the time, or Jolt. And that's pretty much what Skitchin is. In fact, right when you start the game up, first thing you hear is Skitchin, and then it gets you going. And I don't know. And then it starts, with that, hard rock beat. And I have to admit, I love the music still. It makes me smile every time I hear it. And, of course, one of the cool things in Skitchin, and this was a bit different for Electronic Arts titles, was there was a music selector. You could actually select the music. It had a CD player, which, of course, now you smile and maybe snicker a little bit. But it had like a CD player kind of thing, even though it's in a cartridge, But I guess they're trying to live with the times when everyone was buying CDs. But anyways, it's kind of like Road Rash, except for you're on rollerblades, and you're trying to skitch, which means you're grabbing onto cars, holding onto cars, and then as other competitors are there, you're trying to knock them off, or knock them down so they can't follow along. And this game became kind of famous because, of course, people, being people, would be stupid enough to try something like this and actually try to skitch their way along the highways like you would in the game. And that's why you see the big warning label here, and it's explaining to you, like, don't do it, may cause serious injury, don't try this at home kind of thing. And I never even was remotely tempted to do anything that crazy. And of course it was comical. Of course, if in the game, it was a common thing, you get knocked down or whatever. And of course you kind of roll around and then you're in the middle of the road and you get hit by a car, and, yet somehow you still manage to get back up and keep skating. Yeah, right. That's why it's a video game. And, the more your guy gets beat up, you have to, your equipment gets wear and tear, whether it's your knee pads, your elbow pads, or your skates. And so you kind of have to constantly earn money, whether you're through your racing, because it is a race, to then, restore all this gear that, just from the basic wear and tear of the game. And the more you spend, the higher quality it is and the longer it lasts. And I don't know. I had a lot of fun with this game, even though it's pretty repetitive. You've been in one road race here, and the only thing that's different is really the music and I guess you'd say the background scenery, but it's really the same kind of action each time. There's nothing to it. There's no boss battles or anything like that. But I don't know. Eventually, when I came back from that basketball tournament, my brother had just gotten a Sega Genesis, and I said, I have to get this game. And so my mom was going to the mall, and I said, hey, Mom, could you pick up Skitchin? And she's like, well, you're going to pay for it? And I said, yeah, I'll pay for it. And so I gave her like $50, and she went to I don't know where she went, but she picked it up, and I didn't get any change back. So who knows? Maybe they paid more for it. And yeah, I got Skitchin. So this is actually the first Sega Genesis game I ever purchased for myself. And I don't know, I still love it. Sometimes I'll just put it in the machine and actually just listen to the music. That's it's kind of brings me back. And there's actually a pretty cool video of a guy that did actual real guitar to the Skitchin soundtrack, and I'll post that in the clips too, because I think that's pretty cool. I love any attempt to turn like video game music into real music, because it really is real music and it deserves that kind of love. And I love a good guitar, so that's Skitchin. This was another game that my family purchased early. Of course, NBA Jam was one of the big arcade ports of really of that mid '90s time. If you went to an arcade, NBA Jam, I mean, you could hear it all throughout an arcade. From hearing the announcer, from downtown, or he's on fire, which of course is the thing you wanted to hear, or boom shakalaka. Everyone remembers that. And NBA Jam Tournament Edition, which instead of having the normal two players that just really have depending on what NBA team you were going to be, these NBA duos you had. Now you had a third, so you had a little more, I guess, variety and choice, and maybe you're looking for a matchup that you feel you can exploit. So maybe if they're a bigger club that has two real good maybe power forwards, maybe you want guys that are smaller and faster. I don't know, but it was a fun one. It certainly had its share of Easter eggs and little codes you could put a whole variety of players. I remember this one was famous for the fact that you could have Dennis Rodman, and this was the time when Dennis Rodman had kind of like a kind of clownish hair, where it was like multicolored. So that was that phase of Dennis Rodman, as he was becoming more, I guess you'd say, strange in his appearance. From being the pretty straight-laced guy he was with the Detroit Pistons, to then becoming kind of the strange person, or maybe just really becoming, being more comfortable with himself, probably more than anything. But anyways, it was a fun one, and I don't know. It was definitely a game that, especially when your friends were over, that was an easy one to get everyone to want to play, because, I mean, who doesn't love NBA Jam? I mean, I'll admit it, I'm not the biggest, as my wife and I would call it. We call it basketball squeaky ball for the shoes. I'm not the biggest squeaky ball fan, but it's still a damn fun arcade game to play, and this was a great port of it. Okay, almost in the exact opposite direction. Oh man, this is a terrible game. This is Joe Montana 2 Sports Talk Football. As you can see, it's a Sega classic. Maybe they mean classically bad. I don't know. This is a horrible game. I think we picked it up because it was pretty cheap. I want to say it was not even $15, and it was new, complete in box. And of course, the big thing that Joe Montana 2 Sports Talk Football was that it had play-by-play, and the play-by-play is pretty, I mean, it's pretty stiff. I mean, it's the same stitched together phrases. The football gameplay itself, I thought in Sports Talk Football, seemed kind of weird. It was much closer up than, like, let's say John Madden football or even college football. It was much more in your face, and so you'd start with kind of a wide angle, and then it kind of had more of a focus, and it just didn't control very well, and your players never seemed to stay on their feet worth a crap. So that was always really frustrating. And I always kind of felt like if you were throwing the football in this game, it was kind of like a hope and a prayer. I never really felt too often that I had a lot of control or had an understanding of like what to expect. And that gets annoying pretty easily that, like you feel like you can't get anything going offensively. It was always easier to play defense than it was to play offense in this game. So if you couldn't score, you eventually kind of get tired of it. So a friend of mine came over, like I realized the whole social distancing. A friend of mine came over and he saw this. He's like, "Oh, I love this game." He played one quarter, and by the end of the first quarter, he was down like I think 18-0 because he gave up a safety, and it was pretty ugly. And I think he couldn't wait to shut it off. Obviously, the nostalgia only goes so far, and I don't know. This is a game I don't know if I'll ever play it again unless I'm wanting to remember why I don't play this game. But one game I do love and I still enjoy is the game that I played quite a bit in high school, and this is College Football 96. And this is where EA Sports kind of walked away from Bill Walsh and went to just pure college football. And I think that was a really smart idea. It still does have some of the all-star, I guess say all-time teams in it. But the cool thing was it had 108 college football teams. So you had a ton of different options and really was your precursor to, I guess you'd say, modern-day college football. And that continued, of course, until 2014 when the NC2, when some of the players sued because they didn't appreciate the fact that their likenesses were being used. And that they weren't getting any money for it, which I don't know. That's a whole other kettle of fish into itself. But in the meantime, there was this game, and it had a much more college-like playbook. The most notable play that I would say that was introduced through this game was the ability to run the option. And as a high school football coach, and I'm a defensive coach, by the way, but I run the scout offense a lot. Running option is just a big, it's college football, it's high school football. And that was not a kind of play you were going to see in like a John Madden game. And that's what made it cool to me. And so I remember being a high school football player, and this was the game I played. This was the game my friends, my fellow high school football players played. Even our high school football coaches played this. And I remember I played my defense. Our defensive coordinator's name was Mr. Gothier. And I remember playing Mr. Gothier. He was his favorite team, which was the Colorado Buffaloes. I don't know why he liked them. And I was my favorite team, which was the University of Minnesota, the Golden Gophers. And that was when the Golden Gophers were maybe one of the worst teams in college football. But they did have Chris Darkins. He was an unbelievable player at running back, and he's actually pretty good in the game. Unfortunately, but realistically, the players do get tired, so you do actually have to sub guys out, which that, again, adds to the realism. But I don't know. I had a lot of fun with this one. The AI in it can be a bit annoying, though, because it has a tendency to want to keep games closer than maybe they should be. But I still had a lot of fun with this one, and I've played it recently, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I still enjoy it just as much as I did when I was in high school. It's a good one. Okay, so hockey. Okay, I love hockey. You guys may know that already. And this was definitely one of the games that I had more than a few friends that had this. And this is NHLPA Hockey 93. This was NHLPA hockey, of course, because the NHL had pulled its license from Electronic Arts because they were upset that Electronic Arts included fighting in the game. And while fighting was a part of hockey still at that point, and they were still dressing players whose primary role was to fight on the ice, the league, of course, didn't want families and kids back at home I guess, doing that because they felt that was kind of a, no pun intended, a black eye to the image of the league. And so this was a game that, so they pulled their licensure. So not wanting to lose what they had started, Electronic Arts then got an NHLPA license. And so they were still able to use the players' names, and they just called the team Minnesota. Or sorry, not Minnesota. I shouldn't say that. I slapped my face. It'd be Dallas or Detroit or St. Louis, and they would have the right players on the team, but they just wouldn't say what the name of the team was. They weren't, they're no longer the Red Wings. They were no longer the Blues. They're no longer the Dallas Stars. They were just Dallas, just Detroit. And I think for the most part, no one cared. I mean, we saw the players out there, and that meant more to us than maybe, having those team names in there. That the jersey colors were the same. And of course, in this one, you can make Wayne Gretzky's head bleed, or other players' heads bleed, and that was kind of a weird, fun feature. And of course, Chris mentioned that in his NHL '94 profile. And but I do remember this one, and I also remember the site of EASN, which of course that would go away too because they would get sued by ESPN, who felt that was just a little too close to their title. And so pretty soon they were just calling it EA Sports and just leaving it at that. But this game was fun. I remember playing this at my friend Andrew's house. He got a Genesis, and this was definitely one of his favorite games. He used to always be the Buffalo Sabres because Pat LaFontaine and Alexander Mogilny were absolutely killer. And I don't know, this is a fun one. Definitely a good game. But there is one better. The NHL '94. This is freaking awesome. And this is the best hockey game ever made. And I would also argue it may be the best sports game ever made. And they just got everything right. Yes, fighting was eliminated because they, that was a concession they had to make to the league. But everything else, they did a fantastic job, including, of course, introducing the one-timer. And for whatever reason, and Chris was really apt to point this out, is it's the action is fast enough, but it's not too fast. And I believe the developer even talked about that it was just the right tempo and speed that captured what hockey's about, but it didn't turn it into a cartoon. And this game's just fantastic. I have all 3 console iterations of the game here on Genesis. You'll see it when I go through my Super Nintendo collection, and I also have it on Sega CD as well. And I don't know. To me, they're pretty close to the same, although I have to admit, I do kind of like the Super Nintendo version better. That was the one I played more, so maybe that's just bias on my part, but I definitely, as I started to collect for the Genesis again, this was definitely a game I felt I needed to get, and I'm glad I did. And I don't know, it's just a fantastic game, and there's still tournaments. I see it all the time. I've even done some live tweeting of NHL '94 tournaments because in this game there's no season mode. That wouldn't come along until NHL '95. And in NHL '94, you just had a tournament. So you picked your team, and depending on if you're Western Conference Western Conference or Eastern Conference, or Campbell or Wales, you would then go to you'd play in that side of it and play your way one game, one and done series. There's no playoff series. It was just a one game tournament all the way to the Stanley Cup. So you basically had to win 4 games. And I remember live tweeting this one, and Yeah. I don't know. My favorite team was the Hartford Whalers in this game, probably. Hartford Whalers or the Quebec Nordiques. Those were the teams I enjoyed being the most. I could not be Dallas. That's the team I hated. So if I wanted to kick somebody's ass, I would usually make the computer be Dallas and just put up a ton of goals on them because it was just pure spite. But love this game, man. Love it. Okay. I do have a few more sports games. I realize some people really don't like sports games, and so I kind of wanted to get those out of the way. And this is Ayrton Senna's Super Monaco GP. I picked this up at Gaming Generations in Lacrosse. It was pretty cheap, and it was in the box. It's not perfect. It doesn't have the tab on the top, but I'll be perfectly honest, I am not a huge F1 fan, and Chris absolutely worships this guy. I shouldn't say. He'll probably get mad at me for saying that. But Chris this is one of his favorite drivers, and in a lot of Chris's videos, he couldn't help himself but talk about Ayrton Senna, and he wears a jacket that used to be Senna's team, I believe, if I remember correctly. And I don't know, I guess I got it because to me, I guess it makes me think of the Classic Gaming Quarterly channel because I learned really a lot about F1 through being in the channel and hearing Chris talk about it, whether it was going to a race himself last year. And I don't know, I've even watched races because of it. So you never know where it'll take you. So I haven't played this one very much, but definitely this is kind of a reflection of what that channel has meant to me. Okay, and so since we're talking about that, Chris picked this up, I believe, at a thrift store near where he lives. I won't say where. And apparently, I don't think he paid too much for it. And I think he found he had like 2 copies. And I think this was the lesser of the 2 copies. So he kept one for himself and then gave the other one to somebody on the show, or a person that was on the show. I don't know if I won it or if my wife did. Could be my wife. Teresa's a pretty good gamer. At least she's good at those trivia stuff. But this is Arnold Palmer's Tournament Golf, and golf games are fun. I remember I really enjoyed Microsoft Golf for like on the PC. That was actually one of my favorite games, and I've enjoyed it in different formats and different. I always enjoyed golf on Wii or something like that. But admittedly, I have not played this one yet, and I probably should. And Arnold Palmer is the best drink ever, and yeah, he was a pretty funny guy too. So there's Arnold Palmer's Tournament Golf. Okay, moving on. I think we'll go to kind of a different game. This is a 688 Attack Sub. Now, everyone has different passions and interests in their lives, and I guess one of my interests, just to be full disclosure, I have always had a fascination with submarines. And it goes back all the way before I was in first grade. I did a project on submarines when I was in kindergarten. And it was a project for, I guess, they used to call it kids. At our school, we used to call it high potential. What it really means is gifted and talented. And so I learned all about how submarines work, the whole history of them. And so that was something that, when I went to the library to read books and things like that, I was always picking up books that talked about submarines. And it was everything from World War II subs to the, nuclear subs. And so I built model submarines. I even built a model submarine for that project to demonstrate how a submarine works and all that stuff. And so I talked rather lovingly about the NES game Silent Service and how much fun I had with that game, even though probably a lot of people think that game's kind of boring. But for me, it's right up my alley because I love submarines, and that's why I wanted it so bad. And so when I started to collect for the Genesis. I saw this title on the list, and I thought, oh my gosh, has anyone played that? And because I had played a couple computer games that talked about more recent, like nuclear subs. I know they had, what was it? Well, I had a full motion video game. In fact, I still have it somewhere. A full motion PC game called Silent Steel, where it's kind of like a choose your own adventure or really choose how to die kind of game. Because if you screw up, you always end up sinking your sub, and everyone says, "You dummy, you just sunk us," or whatever. That's kind of how it worked. And then I had another game called Seawolf, and Seawolf was a ton of fun. And so I was hoping for like a Sega Genesis version of Seawolf. And 688 stands for is your nomenclature for Los Angeles class attack sub. I know that. That's how geeky I am about it. And so I was hoping to replicate that. So I finally played it last 2 weekends ago. And my friend and I, same guy who came over, we took this out. And I'm like, hey, you want to give this a shot, big guy? That's my buddy Nate. And so we put it in there, and gosh, the manual for this thing is huge. But what was really disappointing was I didn't really find the controls, all like the directions, all that helpful. And not only that, things that easily could have been made useful in that game were not. So like on Seawolf, one of the things you could do is you could listen in on your sonar, and if you knew the audio profile of different ships, you could tell what kind of ships they are. And in this manual, it has a whole catalog of all the different types of ships in the game. And so when you listen in on sonar, it gives you this profile. But most of the damn time, the sonar couldn't tell you what it was. So it was like, what am I doing it for? Doesn't make any sense. And yet you needed to know what ships you were attacking, because if you attacked the wrong ships, you fail the mission. So long story short, my buddy and I got frustrated because we didn't know who we were supposed to sink and where. And we read through it. Trust me, we read through it a lot. And so we just pretty much were like, okay, I see a ship, we're sinking the son of a bitch. And that's what we did. And we did. We sank everything around, which of course meant we were singing people we were not supposed to. And at the end of that mission, it was one of the most hysterical things I've ever seen. So we get this long message from, I guess you'd say, our sub base, and they're basically saying like, "What the hell are you doing?" And then it kind of says, "All our ships are sunk. This is a disaster." And then it just kind of ends. And then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, by the way, you are a complete idiot. We can't wait till you get home to squeeze the blood out of you. And you must be the worst sub-captain in American naval history." And I just thought it was hysterical that the game got that worked up for a player doing what we did. But then strangely enough, because you can either, in some of the missions, you can either be the Americans or the Russians, the Soviets, I guess. And we did a mission where we were the Soviets, and again, had the same problems, had a hard time finding the enemies that we needed to. Finally got frustrated, so my buddy decides, you know what, we're just going to beach this Russian submarine off the coast of Libya, because that's where we were. And so he just goes in full speed, and you can imagine how ridiculous that would actually really be. And so we went full speed ahead right into shore with this Soviet sub, and of course, collision, kind of a red screen falls over it, and instead of getting chewed out by, I guess the Soviet Navy, they said that they would honor us with a Hero of Lenin award for our bravery. And I was like, what? I don't know. It just seemed hysterical. So then we did another U.S. mission and failed miserably. And this time we got a postcard. Apparently it was meant to be a postcard like that was given to our families for for art, like saying like, remember your loved one, like after we had died. And that just seemed kind of weird. So I don't know. I guess the game was good for some laughs, even though the game itself kind of disappointed. Maybe if I read a little bit more into it, maybe I'll actually learn how to play it correctly. But I guess it was good for some laughs with an old friend of mine, and I don't know. I'll probably never forget it for that memory alone. Okay, next one. Now, I know this is kind of a, to some people, seeing like labels and stuff like prices is, like they say, oh, no, get rid of that. I don't know. I have this thing, and it's, of course, you can see this is a final markdown, $3.95, which tells you what I paid for it. I bought this at a video store called Tidal Wave, which used to be a bit of a chain, and usually a lot of suburb areas, maybe in the upper Midwest. And it was Star Trek, especially the Next Generation. And for $3.95, this was going to be my brother's Christmas present. Here, buddy. This is what you are. You're not even $5. So I picked it up, figuring my brother would be tickled. And I don't know. My brother likes Star Trek: The Next Generation too. He probably, I don't know if he'd admit that now, but he enjoyed watching it with me. And I bought on this game not really knowing what my brother was going to do. And this, I guess, for myself, this is, I don't know. For myself as an older brother, I felt it was kind of cool that when my brother opened his gift and he got his game, my brother's eyes just opened real wide. And the curious thing happened was my brother went down in our basement at the time and played this game and was intent. Like, I've never seen my brother so focused on a video game ever. And he was almost like a hermit, just absolutely determined to beat this game. And at some point he couldn't figure something out. So he went on the internet, which, mind you, the internet at this day and age was still pretty primitive, to say the least. And I remember he printed off, which tells you the date and age, of how things work nowadays. He printed off a huge walkthrough for this game. And he didn't want it to just have him tell him what to do the whole time. He only wanted to use it when he couldn't, like when he was completely baffled, but he was out of ideas, more or less. And I just was amazed at like how dedicated he was to try to beat this one. So apparently he was really enjoying himself. And I asked him if he wanted me to come down there and help. And my brother looked at me and said, no, I don't. And I don't know. I felt kind of proud that my brother would dedicate himself to a game like that. And I also felt kind of good that, hey, I realized it was only $3.95, but apparently that was pretty good money well spent because he got a lot out of it. So it made me feel good to know that he played it and enjoyed it. And I'll probably never forget that. And plus, I love Star Trek Next Generation. So I have this game both on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. Spoiler alert. Okay. This is actually one of my more recent pickups. This is complete in box, Sword of Vermilion. And believe it or not, I also picked this up because of my brother. This is going to sound really stupid. Obviously, I know Sword of Vermilion is a role-playing game, and I've kind of said in the past I'm not the hugest fan of role-playing games. But my brother and I used to enjoy stuff like that when we were kids, and the last few summers, including this one, I guess we'll find out if this mess that we're in right now allows us to still do this. We hope so. But we go up to a lake up in northern Minnesota called Lake Vermilion. And so I thought my brother might, just based on the name, be willing to maybe enjoy that opportunity. Maybe if the weather's bad up there and we're not able to fish, because that's normally what we go up there to do. Who knows if you'll want to do it or not? But either way, it was a complete in-box game, and I've heard good things about it, so it was a good excuse. But I'm hoping my brother will maybe give it a shot with me, even if it's just for maybe an hour or so, just to kind of relive that. But I don't know. I'll let you know eventually, maybe in a stream, because that won't be till the summertime. So this will be much, much later from now. But I'll let you know if that happens, because I hope it does. Okay, this is also a relatively recent pickup for me, and that is Shadow Dancer. This game was really tough to find. Oh, man, no one had it. Everyone had Revenge of Shinobi, Shinobi 3, but not Shadow Dancer. And, of course, Shadow Dancer is the Shinobi game, The Secret of Shinobi, which has him and, of course, his wolf or dog-like friend with him, his companion. And I just thought that was kind of interesting and unique. And that's, of course, why I wanted it. And I'm sure that's also why this is the game that seems to be the toughest one to find. Marketing-wise, I don't know why they decided to make Shadow Dancer the title that it was so big. And The Secret of Shinobi so tiny on the thing. I think it would have sold a lot better and maybe had a better following that way, because maybe a lot of people never really noticed that. They probably thought it had something to do with something completely different. But the gameplay is fun with this one, and I don't know. I wanted to get it, but it just took me a long time, but I'm glad I did. And so this was the last piece of the Shinobi trilogy for me. Okay, next one. You can see I also picked this up at Tidal Wave, but a lot more expensive this time. This is Jurassic Park, which is actually kind of a rare game. You can either be, of course, a human being fighting your way through it, or you can be a raptor. And this game's kind of frustrating, to say the least. It's kind of cryptic as to what you need to be doing, and it's really easy to die. And I don't know. The control is not the tightest, and it's a damn shame, because I think Jurassic Park is a really cool idea. I think for a video game, there's a lot of different ways to go at it, especially when you can either be, of course, a raptor or a human. But I never seemed to be able to get too far to really feel like I was going anywhere. And so after you really can't really figure out what you're going to do, you eventually kind of get bored with it. And since this was a former rental game, so you can see it says VGM, which I'm sure was supposed to tell anybody who worked at the rental store where this is a former rental copy, that, it's a video game. It doesn't have the manual in it. So there was nothing I could read to maybe try to figure out what the hell is supposed to be happening. I'm sure I realized I could totally look at a playthrough or something like that to figure that out more, but at the time I couldn't. So those things just weren't around. So I just got frustrated with it, and it just kind of got buried. And by that time, we had started to move away from the Genesis as a whole. And so it quickly became forgotten. Okay, pick this one up this winter. And that's Beavis and Butthead from Beavis and Butthead. I think I picked this one up in Eau Claire. Yeah, at the Gaming Generations in Eau Claire. And, of course, Beavis and Butthead were... If Skitchin was early mid-90s classic, Beavis and Butthead was the cartoon everyone was watching. And, of course, they're basically like the two idiots everyone knows from high school. And my brother and I, from making fun of music videos to sawing their finger off. And, of course, everyone immediately kind of reverts into like some kind of Beavis and Butthead impression, whether it's, or, Cornholio or talking about stuff like that. And the classic Mike Judge cartoon. And I don't know. I never, I wasn't big into, the series as a whole. I enjoyed watching it. I remember I had videotapes of Beavis and Butthead episodes. And it was fun, and I'm sure this game is not that great, but even if it makes me remember a few things from the show or think back to some of those things, it's worth it for just the nostalgia alone. Okay, I picked this up about a year ago from a friend of mine, my friend Blake, who sold it to me, I think for $40. And that's about what it's worth. It's a complete box copy of Streets of Rage, the first one, or Bare Knuckle, as sometimes people call it, and classic beat 'em up. And I talked glowingly about Streets of Rage 2, and of course this one's a little bit different. And of course I think Streets of Rage 2 is better, but this is where it all kind of started. And of course, they would also have Streets of Rage 3, but I did not have that one. So I just have 1 and 2. But this is the only one I have complete in box. So I was happy to pick this one up. And hey, little personal award tonight. I didn't have a chance to show this, but I'm down in the man cave, and my wife played Final Fight tonight. First time ever she ever played a beat 'em up game. And she was doing pretty good. I was very proud of her, and hopefully it's a sign of things to come. Maybe I'll get her to play Streets of Rage once. I hope. Okay, I picked this one up at Gaming Generations in Eau Claire, and this is Sunset Riders. This is an arcade port, basically a Western-themed shooter, side-scrolling shooter, and this game is all kinds of cool. I wish I never saw this one in the arcades. I really didn't. And I know, I'm sure it's a little more offbeat. It would have been around the same time as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in time. And I'm sad I didn't, because it's very interesting. I love the characters. And of course, it's immensely fun to play co-op. And my friend and I, Nate, played this one a couple of weeks ago co-op, and that's so much better. And the one thing I definitely learned, I need a 6-button controller, because this game, or at least for myself, my 3-button controller didn't really work very well, and I'm not sure if it's the controller or whatnot, but it wasn't allowing me to move. All I could really do is go one direction, and so I kind of had to really just cover my friend's back. That's all I could do for him, and we did okay that way, but you want more control than that, so I don't know. But it wasn't working for me for whatever reason. But Sunset Riders is a really cool one. Okay, I remember when I first saw this on Chris's stream. I remember he picked it up somewhere down in Los Angeles, if I remember correctly. But this is Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. And the game is just strange. The best part of the game really is the fact that you can listen to Michael Jackson tunes while you're playing a video game. It's a platformer. You save children, because that's what you'd expect Michael to do. And I don't know, it's unique, and I guess the game was definitely, just like anything with Michael Jackson, probably had to be personally approved by him. And I don't know, it's an interesting game. I enjoy it just because it's strange, really. I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of variety to what you do in the game. There really isn't. And of course, the weird dance off at the end that you have, where you're dancing with the different people you just beat the crap out of, is an odd twist. But I don't know. There's something about it that makes me enjoy it. And I don't know. I've had a lot of fun with it, and I paid about $80 for it for complete in box. But it's a top-notch quality. It's a top-notch quality. So I don't know. I guess I'm pleased with it. I don't have any buyer's remorse or anything. And it's a bizarre game, but again, one that you're only going to find on the Genesis. Okay. I know somebody's going to make fun of me over this, but this is Castlevania Bloodlines. This is the Majesco version. Yes, I know, with the cardboard box. But this game's absolutely amazing. And I love Castlevania. I've loved all their games, and it just continues to prove just how fantastic. Um, I don't know. There's really, I don't know. I haven't played, me personally. I realize there are some bad or not so great Castlevania games out there, but they're really in the minority. I mean, most of them are really great platforming titles, and this one's one of the best. One of the best. I'm really excited for Rondo of Blood if I get my TurboGrafx Mini, but this one is excellent, excellent. Um, I would say I might like this one better than Super Castlevania 4, which that's saying a lot because I love that game to death. So this one's a great game, and I was glad I was able to pick it up. Yeah, I wish I had the hard box version, but hey, it was more important to me to play the game than to worry about the rest of it. And the fact I even have any box at all, I guess I'm fine with that, even though it is kind of beat up. Okay, this next game, Phantasy Star 2, classic, super classic role-playing game for the Sega Genesis. I picked this one up at Games for Us. If you remember from yesterday, I talked at length about how Games for Us was originally, they had 2 stores, 2 locations, and they were consolidating to just the Mawson location because their other stores in Richland Center. And so I went and picked this one up as it was sitting in that cardboard box. And I knew almost just looking at it that this was something special. And little did I realize just how interesting this game is, where it's science fiction and fantasy at the same time. And that, that kind of hits on those elements that you see like in a series like Final Fantasy, to be perfectly honest. And this game did it well before Final Fantasy did. And the colors, the music, the story, even the combat are just fun. And it came with the manual and everything. Yeah, the box is a bit chewed up, but overall it's in relatively reasonable shape. At least the game wise and the manual, which is important in this game. You really need it. But a lot of fun, a lot of fun. Okay, this next game I got introduced to this one by Bithead 1000. He talked about Star Control, and this is what's it called? A ballistics game. That's right. This is a ballistics game, otherwise known as Accolade, and they made these cardboard box Genesis games. And Star Control is kind of a top-down alien spaceship combat game, and these spaceships have very different styles. They're very unique. And in a way, it kind of reminded me of playing a game like for PlayStation 2, Star Trek Encounters. And I thought the music, well, maybe not as much the music, but the sound effects are really cool. It definitely had that like original Star Trek vibe. And I don't know, I thought that was really unique. I'm terrible in this game. Quite honestly, I'm still trying to figure out the controls and really how to fight really well. I kept getting annihilated, but it's really unique and not something you see very often. And I don't know, I'm glad I picked it up. So thanks, Bithead. Okay, this next one was a suggestion from the CGQ forums. I want to say Bard told me about this one. I could be wrong. I think it was Bard Snagglebug, I think his name is. And he told me about this game because I think he said it was big in Europe. And this is a shooter called Sub-Terrania. And the way I would describe it is the game is a lot like Solar Jetman is for Nintendo, where you're this little spaceship, and it's, now mind you, Sub-Terrania, you're a spaceship that, well, I shouldn't say spaceship, you're like a ship that is on these worlds where you're underneath the ground, hence Sub-Terrania, you're under land. And in this, I don't know, call it like the Earth's mantle or these planets' mantle or whatever, you have this little ship that you fly around. And the game, you have like a central kind of base, and you take your ship up, and like Solar Jetman, the gravity of the landscape kind of pulls at your ship. And so it's not a game where you're just moving forward all the time. You kind of assert thrust like you would in a spacecraft. So you do it in small bursts so that you stay underneath control. And while there are some enemies out there that you can shoot and destroy, a lot of it is going to these areas where you will pick up these crew members that have been stranded, and you'll land the ship, and then they'll come aboard your ship, and then your goal is, of course, to return them safely to the base ship. And you only have so much fuel to do it in, otherwise then you run out of fuel, and then you, of course, crash into the landscape, and pretty soon your ship is destroyed. So it's a lot like I said, it's kind of like a Sega Genesis version of Solar Jetman. At least that's what it reminded me of. And kind of interesting, and that's really kind of what you do throughout the game. The game's not terribly valuable. I believe I only paid like $12 or $13 for it, complete in box. So if you're looking for kind of a different kind of challenge, it's very affordable, and you can get it complete in box. So I don't know, I'd pick it up. I mean, if you're looking for something different, it's definitely unique, that's for sure. Okay. Moving on to another game. This is Insector X. This is a Sage's creation game. I picked this one up at Gaming Generations in La Crosse, and it's a side-scrolling shooter, kind of like a Section Z would be for like Nintendo. And of course, it's, there's insects all over the place. But the thing that does kind of suck in this game is that it has kind of an unforgiving hitbox. Seems like you get killed or damaged by a lot of marginal shots that didn't really look like it hit you. That's the one thing that's annoying, of course. And it's an okay game, but that kind of stuff just kind of wears on you. So when you compare it to the library of shooters, it kind of lowers it pretty quick down on the list because there's just so many good ones to choose from. But I did pick this one complete in box, even though it's a bit beat up. I think I paid $30 for it. Okay, this next one comes to us all the way from Japan. This is a Japanese Mega Drive game. This is Dangerous Seed, and again, I would definitely give all the credit to Butthead 1000. I think someone sent this into him, or maybe he picked it up for himself. I cannot remember. But this is a game a lot kind of like Truxton or Batsujin, and this game's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorites, and of course, the enemies, as we can see in the picture, are somewhat like biological in theme. I know that I got to like the third level, and it was called Power Squid, I think is what the name of the creature was that you were trying to destroy. First one, of course, is a big spider like you see there on the cover. But it is a lot of fun. You can upgrade in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different variety in the upgrades that you can get for your ship, which I think is pretty cool. And it's really, really well done. And I think I picked up my copy for maybe $60, $70. So it's kind of on the pricey side, but it's not crazy pricey in my opinion. Like if you're looking at your more, like, if you're looking at your higher end Sega shooters, it goes a lot higher than that. But this one's definitely a fun one, and luckily with my Mega SG, I could play this game and not have to really worry about it because it is a Mega Drive game. So you'd need either some kind of mod or I guess in my case a system that'll take it, but it is really cool. And I love the box art. That almost looks like an album cover, an 80s hairband album cover myself, if you ask me. Okay, this next one is a homebrew, and this is a homebrew that is just freaking cool. This is Bitmap Bureau's Xenocrisis. This game is freaking awesome. Best way to describe it is I got 3 games I would throw it as. Smash TV meets Metal Slug meets Gauntlet. Yeah, something like that. And this game's really intense. It's much more fun to play co-op than by yourself. But the enemies are cool. The graphics are phenomenal. And the wonderful thing is Bitmap Bureau did a great job on the box. I mean, this is a homebrew game, but they made it look all different kinds of Sega Genesis style with the grid. Even the back looks like your classic Sega Genesis game. I mean, just look at it compared to like Phantasy Star here, okay? Pretty much the same exact format. And I just think that's awesome. And this game's so much fun. So much fun. And it was a bit pricey since it came across the pond, but well worth it. I think I paid 70 euros or 70 pounds for it. I'm not even sure what that is. I'll be perfectly honest. American. I'm sure it wasn't. I'm sure it hurt. It hit the wallet pretty hard, but I wanted it and I didn't care. And this is a phenomenal game, and Bitmap Bureau deserves a ton of credit. They made a phenomenal homage to a classic, for a classic system that is the Genesis. Okay, this next one's kind of beat the crap. This is Raiden Trad, another shooter. This is from Big Net again. That's that company I was making fun of that I thought looked kind of Bush League. And I don't know, Raiden Trad is a game that some people really like a lot. I know on other systems the ports of it are pretty good. I think it's okay. Kind of fly kind of I don't know, it looks kind of like a big fighter jet. And it's, it's a classic kind of shooter. I wouldn't say it's my favorite one. And so I picked up Raiden Trad at Gaming Generations and Lacrosse, and I think I paid $30 for it as it is. And it doesn't have the manual. It's just the box and the game, and you can see the box is definitely seen better days. Okay, here's another cool one. This is Whip Rush by Renovation. Renovation makes a bunch of awesome shooters. And this one's pretty cool. I love the graphics. I love the way this game starts. It has kind of an almost anime kind of beginning to it. And that's what really makes it kind of cool. And they kind of pivot and switch directions. And I don't know, this is kind of a fun one. And the cover's great. The gameplay's fun. And it probably doesn't get enough credit for what it is. But this is a cool cover. And I don't know. I've always kind of got the belief that if you look at this from a distance, it almost looks like it's like one of those things where it kind of plays tricks with your eyes. And I realize, there's focus on the camera here, but I always kind of felt like even just looking at it, it tunes in and out of focus, and I have good vision. So I don't know, maybe I need to get out more. I don't know. The classic game room love child that is Truxton. And I will totally admit, the first time I ever heard of or even saw Truxton was on Chris's channel when he was showing, when he had his post about, are my Sega games organized in a weird way or something like that. I'll post a link to that on the description. But this is Truxton, the classic shooter. You either have your classic just small little bullets as you power up, and you can have a whole horde of those, which is just freaky how many that you get, especially once you're fully powered up that way. Or you can have like what I call the daggers, which are the green kind of energy bolts. Or, in my opinion, I still like the electricity, which is what you see, of course, on the box cover, because it's smart. It follows enemies around, and that gives you some versatility that you don't have to be aiming at it to hit it. It'll kind of do the work for you. But this game is frustratingly hard as hell. It's kind of grinding on you for that, and you can die and lose progress, which sucks. I enjoy it, but it's definitely one that can test your patience at times. And of course, just like any shooter, if you're powered up and suddenly you get killed, it's super painful to start back in pea shooter mode. You're pretty much, you feel like a wounded gazelle in the Serengeti. You're just going to get killed. And of course, there's the Mega Bomb, which to me is the most 80s album cover thing ever. The Mega Bomb in this game, a giant skull. Come on, I mean, that's so Iron Maiden. It's not even funny. Love it. Anyways, here's another one. This is another one I actually have to give Chris 100% credit again. Sorry for talking about. Not that I should be sorry for talking about Chris so much, but I actually asked Chris. I said, "What is there any recommended shooters you'd recommend?" And he said, "You should try Hellfire." And this is by Seismic. And if you've never played Hellfire, unlike I guess other shooters, is you really choose the directions that your ship fires in. In other words, you have a couple different preset directions where it'll shoot maybe at like diagonals, or just straight ahead, or up and down, or just backwards. And you have to switch between those different modes to effectively really play well in this game. And you can power all of those weapons up. So the more powerful you are, obviously, then you're really, cooking in that game. But it takes a little bit to kind of get used to that whole idea of changing the different modes on your ship. But it's really cool, and I really like the color. I like the style of the game, and I have to admit, my default method when I'm fighting in this game would probably be diagonals. That's my favorite one. Kind of covers your front and your back, although straight in the face you can get hit, or straight in the back you can get hit. But give me diagonal. I like the fact that you can kind of sometimes creep shots around the corner and hit stuff that might be trying to get a free shot at you. And I don't know. This is a really good game, and another one that I don't think you hear enough about. It deserves more credit, and this is a really nice complete in box copy. Okay, I actually did mention this game yesterday. I actually have this on the Switch as well. This is Lightning Force Quest for the Darkstar. This game's tough and unforgiving. I had a hard time with this one on the Switch. I'm a little bit better playing this on the Genesis. And this really was my little, I guess, dive into some of the more higher end shooters for the Genesis. In fact, I actually picked this up before I picked up like Thunder Force 2 and Thunder Force 3. But I had a lot of fun with this one. And again, kind of like Hellfire, you can, as you go through your upgrades, you can choose maybe weapons that will be shooting backwards or front, or at an angle. Although not quite as preset like Hellfire is. Hellfire's fixed that way for the whole game no matter what. This one, your upgrades are a little bit different that way. But this one's kind of tough. Some of the enemies take a hell of a lot of hits, and that's where the game can be kind of frustrating, just because I don't know. I kind of feel like certain bosses are just a little too. I don't know. It just takes a little too much work, in my opinion, and in some places. But you do have the one thing that you do have in the game is you kind of choose where you're going to start. So you choose one of 4 different stages, and you start the game. So it does give the player a little bit of choice, whereas in a lot of other games you just go through the stages and they're in the order that they're at. This one you have a little bit of choice in the matter, so that's kind of cool. Okay, next is Sagaia, which of course is the Darius really clone, or not Darius clone, but it is Darius for the Sega Genesis. And this is complete in box. Darius Twin, which of course goes back to, you know, like those games are just fun, and they of course feature kind of organic but mechanized creatures and bosses. So the art's beautiful, the gameplay is super smooth, and this is a fun one. It's a lot of fun. It's one of my favorites, Sagaia. And of course they put this, I believe they put this on the Sega Genesis Mini, which I have to admit I wasn't too thrilled about that. Just thinking how it might affect values, but I don't know. I guess more people can play it now and appreciate it for what it is, but because it is kind of a tough one to find. Okay, and next is Gaiares, another fantastic shooter for the Sega Genesis. This one's this one's pretty cool, and one of the cool things, of course, is you can steal weapons, which that's just a really neat mechanic. I think that's super clever, and fight that way. And this is again another game that this is my renovation, which makes a ton of great shooters. And this is another one that's hard to get a hold of. And again, this is complete in box. Okay, and my last one, MUSHA. Now, a couple things. Let me just get this out of the way. This is by Seismic. The box is not authentic. That is a Chinese reproduction. But the game inside, and just to prove it, so it's not just me saying this, the game inside is a real MUSHA game. So the game is real and 100% authentic, original MUSHA, but it didn't have a box, and it just felt wrong to me that the game did not have a proper, didn't have a box to go with it. And so I found this cheap reproduction one, and yeah, that's not great. It'd be, of course, much better and much more valuable if it was the real deal. But that's a whole different level of spending. And just the game itself was pretty pricey, to say the least. But at least I guess I feel like it's a more proper home for MUSHA. And of course, this is a vertical shooter. And this is one of the most sought after games for the Genesis. And I don't know. I think personally, I like other shooters on the system a little bit better than MUSHA. That's not to complain about it. But I don't see really what makes this game as expensive as it is when you compare it to like a Hellfire, which I think Hellfire is a really good game. I think Sagaia is a really good game. And I would say I would put them above MUSHA in terms of my overall fun factor. But from the collector standpoint, it was a game I felt compelled to try to get, and I did. And so that's it. That is my Sega Genesis collection. I'd love to hear from you. I did have the chat open this time, and no one said anything to me. Which I guess that's your prerogative. Maybe you guys are saying something, because it says it's unable to connect to the chat. So, but either way, I hope you enjoyed this little trip through memory lane and through my collection. We'll continue on, probably moving on to, it probably make the most sense to go to Super Nintendo. So maybe that's what we'll do next. I might be another maybe day or two before I go and try to stream again. But either way, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everything's going well for you and that you're safe. And like I said, please let me know what you think. I'm kind of putting myself out there, and like I said, I hope this is something that you're enjoying. So let me know either on Twitter at Crease and Assist or in the comments section below. Either way, I'll see you next time.